Chapter 33. Captivity Day 29. Ogeron had taken care of his midnight fellowship military duties in the early hours of the morning. The general public had no idea of the Cletharian threat. While they were out at breakfast, Cho received a couple fruit delivery requests. He thought she should tell them she couldn't work today, but she was determined despite the potential danger. This may just be an expression of her jealousy. Adyarxie had gone out for brunch at the top of the world. Ogeron had never been either, and wouldn't want to go to such an exclusive restaurant without Azuri on his arm. He had shot Navari a note asking if she knew what was going on and didn't let Cho know he'd gotten a reply. The last thing he needed was for her to get more worked up because Adyarxie went there as the guest of Mistress Kaylani. Hopefully, something positive would come from their conversation. After breakfast they headed to Cho's place so she could change into her delivery uniform. Ogeron had insisted on accompanying her on her deliveries. If something happened to their strawberry girl while Mistress Kaylani and Adyarxie were at brunch, there would be Cletharia to pay. He was a little surprised when she took her things with her into the bathroom to get dressed. It wasn't until then that he realized she hadn't flirted with him once in the time they'd been together. As much as he enjoyed Cho's playfulness, it was nice to see a more serious side of her. He sat on her bed while waiting for her to change. It was really uncomfortable. Between her first and second deliveries, Navari forwarded him a notification from Systems Security. Cletharia had activated the Starlink and were withdrawing from the area. The discussion with Mistress Kaylani must be going well. He hadn't bothered to go inside with her on this trip. He was just dropping off something at the temple complex. Security there was high enough he wouldn't be needed. The next delivery was at a government office in an agrarian township 20 miles to the west. After arriving, he walked her to the appropriate office and waited patiently by the door while the governor hit on her. She seemed to either be enjoying the attention or was having fun playing along. His tablet beeped 3 times while walking back to the car. "You should check that," Cho said forcefully. "If it's important they'll..." Ogeron was interrupted by a 4th beep. "Let me know." "No," Strawberry said with an icy tone and frightened expression. "I said you should check it. Don't forget I'm a cyberpath. Even when they're unopened I can sense the message headers." "What's wrong?" Ogeron asked while opening the car door for her. "Just the headers," Cho said as she sat in the passenger seat. "I can't see the content. They're all marked urgent. 2 from your wife, 1 from your military and another from Navari. Do you want me to tell you what the titles are, or are you going to open your fucking messages?" Ogeron pulled out his tablet. The first message was from his wife titled, Cletharia. He skipped to the next message. The second message, forwarded from his battalion commander, was titled, Fleet Withdrawal. "I already know Cletharia is leaving," Ogeron muttered as he opened the second message. It was from Midnight Fellowship Tactical Command, instructing all forces galaxy-wide to prepare to return to Fellowship space using the fastest possible route. Additional orders from his battalion commander were included, informing all troops they had 2 hours to report for duty, and would be heading directly to the regional Starlink. The message from Navari was titled, Change of Orders. Under the administrative authority of the order, Ogeron was to stay on Erosha to assist in negotiating a peaceful resolution with the Cletharian Queen. "Hang on," Ogeron grumbled as Cho watched him disapprovingly. He went back to the top of the list and opened the first message from his wife. The Tetarn Gate had been rediscovered and repaired by the Fellowship, but it had been built by the Colmeon Empire long before his species even existed. Apparently the Cletharians had some way of accessing it. The fleets leaving Kaylani space were returning to the Midnight Fellowship's sphere of influence, and his nation had no way to deactivate the Stargate. Azuri was in a panic and so was the government. These were the same citadels that had wiped out the Loctarians. She needed to know what was happening and why they were there. The last was from Azuri with the title, Get Dark Seed. Now, the Midnight Fellowship had authorized LAM activation sequences for all allied systems. As part of their charter, they needed to declare the Fellowship dissolved into its subfactions before firing, which shouldn't take long. I need to contact Adyarch C, Ojeran stammered. Why haven't you read the update she sent earlier? Cho scolded. What update? Ojeran said urgently, I don't see. I saw the header while we were driving here, Cho said firmly. I'm taking control of your tablet. She ignored his attempt to hand it to her. It was auto-filtered into your trash folder, Strawberry said angrily. I'll fix your settings later. A message from Adyarch C opened up on the screen. It briefly explained she was directing the fleet to Fellowship space to settle some homeless species in the recently depopulated systems. She hoped it would prevent conflicts over who would fill the vacuum. Adyarch C went on to mention Somri having a discussion with Azure about it during the wing ceremony. Ojeran just passed a copy of the message to all the freaked-out officials who had messaged him. Thank you, Cho, he said with relief. I'm sorry if I upset you. Tell me why I'm angry, she smirked. Then I'll forgive you. It didn't take a mind reader to recognize where he'd gone wrong, but being married to one for a few decades certainly helped. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you, Ojeran lowered his head as he spoke. I do value your input. Good, Cho said with a bratty smile. I guess I'll have to forgive you this time. Ojeran got in the car and started driving. Once we're back in the city, I'm going to rent us a hotel room. That's a little presumptive, Cho teased. They're doing work on the special containment area. They know where you live, and if you paid for a room it would be traceable, Ojeran said. It just makes sense. Are you going to be okay? Cho asked. Why wouldn't I be? He asked. You just seem, Cho shrugged. I don't know. You're usually so quick to check messages. You almost didn't read one of your wife's messages. That's not like you. Did something happen? Did you two get in a fight? Nothing like that, Ojeran sighed. Tomorrow Galactic Standard, not local, will be Adyarch C's 30th day. Or would be. I first met her just before her 20th. I've only known her for 10 days, just 4 days longer than I've known you. She gave me a deadline for when I should be away from the system. I didn't think much of it until that fleet showed up. I think she gave me one too, Strawberry said. 5 days before the timer on her app runs out. Her what? Ojeran asked with a start. I noticed it the first time she let me access her hardware. She has a countdown running. It will hit 0 in about 30 days, Cho explained. Does it say what it's for? Ojeran inquired. No, Cho shrugged. When I heard about that fleet, I was worried she'd moved up her timeline, and there's no way I could get out of here before they'd get here. We'd be safe, Cho smiled weakly. She knows people on a ship nearby. She was going to make sure the two of us get out safely. Just us, Ojeran said solemnly. They only have room for 2 people, Cho said sadly. So, she was going to stay behind and send you and me to safety. You and me? Ojeran asked. I thought you meant you and her. Not our Kali, Cho insisted. I think she planned to stay to try and protect the rest of the people who are important to her. Yeah, that sounds like Adyarch C, he said in a distant tone. I'm going to miss her. Miss her, Cho said in alarm. While I was snooping your tablet, I was sure it said they wanted you to stay here. No, I'm not shipping out yet, Ojeran chuckled softly. They're restoring the containment area. She's having an unscheduled meeting with Mistress Kilani. The station logged the arrival of a ship registered to a ghost. Someone capable of putting Adyarch C down. Cletheria is pulling out. Do the math. Cho opened her mouth as if she was going to speak, but instead lowered her head and remained silent. One way or another, I don't expect to see her again, Ojeran sighed. I'll keep you safe until her people come to collect you. You said she has a ship nearby. I doubt you'll be around much longer, but at least I'll have the chance to say goodbye to you. After this, I doubt I'll renew my citizenship next time it lapses. Have you reserved that room yet? Cho asked. No, not yet, Ojeran sighed. I thought we should pick a hotel together. There are a lot of options. Just make sure to include her name on the room, Cho smiled weakly. Just in case. I will, he nodded. After getting back to the capital city, they picked out a hotel and got a room for 3. They headed upstairs. She asked him to pick her up some clothes from her apartment and headed straight for the shower. She felt dirty but couldn't tell him that. He felt terrible. Ogeron was so upset, but there were things Cho had been told while helping to encrypt last night's call that she wasn't allowed to talk about. Secrets that could set his mind to rest. Her senpai had showed her a copy of a binding contract between Kali and her Tejmare, signing over rights to her body to cyanide. It was vital that nobody knew about it. This was the card Kali had kept up her sleeve since her arrival. Withholding the property from the Lamentic High Court could be regarded as a declaration of war. Naturally, there were ways to mitigate or even circumvent the consequences, but not if you were blindsided by the agreement. She wanted to tell him Kali would be okay, but it would just feel like empty words unless she told him more. She turned the heat in the shower up high enough it was almost uncomfortable. That call with Kali was both confusing and informative. She used to have 2 people inside her but in a non-sexual way which sounded really uncomfortable. Despite being locked up with limited ability to communicate, she had a lot going on. She was funding a rebellion somewhere past the Dew Star slipstream, trying to overthrow the Ishilar government, arranging to make her sister a second Cletharian queen, trying to locate a ship called Black Orion, and raising adopted Jagaltim and some weird creature called Shelly. Samari was also trying to get a species recognized as being sentient. There were also some dealings with the Merkmarines and her connections to the Lamentics. Judging from the marks on Samari's wrists, very close relations. There was mention to an armorer and the person managing the Havras system. They were even trying to regain control of the Pilth Stargate without throttling Toscorp. All that from one conversation. She had a lot more to learn than new technical skills. It was overwhelming, but the amount of faith Senpai Tyrell, his friend Jalit and Kali had in her, was heartening. Even Samari and her Lamentic friend Oleander had given her a confidence boost. After spending years on Erosha trying to keep to herself and not make lasting connections, she'd finally made the kind of friends she'd wished for since she got trapped here years earlier. The kind who would offer to take here away from here and mean it. Plenty had made offers like that without knowing. She could tell they were lying about their name, relationship status, how long they were really staying, and where they were really from with a quick glance at their electronic profile. If they were cute, she'd just enjoy being pampered for the night and sneak out after they fell asleep. There was one who may have meant it. His tablet data log showed almost a dozen mistresses across Corrales. They all thought they were the only one and almost all of them had kids. Regardless of the possibility of a comfortable life with an allowance, Cho wasn't going to be some corporate asshole's leased uterus. She refused his offer, packaged up a month's worth of his messages, and made sure his next transmission would have an unfortunate glitch. If they wanted to remain part of his weird baby farm, that was on them, but they deserved to know the truth, and so did his husband. She stepped back from the stream of water and lathered up her long hair. She had a problem with the lying, not with being the other woman. That was one of the things she immediately respected about Ogeron. He took a picture of her to send to his wife. Kali was upfront about having a Tejmare too. She wasn't a dirty little secret for either of them, and more importantly, she wasn't just a hole to fill. Kali had proven that more than once. Ogeron had helped her find some extra work and showed genuine concern even if Cho was just the bonus other woman. She had been a little uncomfortable earlier when he'd taken her by her apartment. Cho let her hair hang in front of her as she stepped back under the water. She usually didn't take showers this hot. It made the dye fade faster. Their breakfast outing was nice and they'd finally gotten some time to talk, just her and Ogeron. She didn't know why he seemed so preoccupied. Every time they'd played around, Kali had been there. He felt a little insecure. Would he still be interested if it was just her, or was it the package deal that made his code run? Cho felt an electronic signal. Oi Aaron möcht be back. She reached down between her legs and smirked. Stubble. If she went much longer, it would start getting real uncomfortable down there. He knocked softly and said, I put your clothing on the vanity just outside the door. Hey Uja, would you mind getting me a razor? Cho said loudly. I need to shave. What kind? He asked. She giggled to herself as his tablet beeped. I'll go get it, he said. The message she sent him included an image of what she needed and what store she normally bought them from, as well as the shelf location. If he was going to do her a favor, the least she could do was make it easy on him. She adjusted the water, stepped back and wrung out her hair. This may be her only chance to be with him, just the two of them. Would he be interested if it was just her? If he wasn't, that was fine. She was a lot more attracted to Kali, but Cho did enjoy the feel of his hardware. She'd just ask him to come in to hand her the shaving supplies and judge by his response. She was a little nervous. It would be a lot simpler if... She wanted him to herself at least for a while. She prepped a message to Kali to let her know where they were staying, and scheduled its delivery time to ensure she'd have a few hours alone with him. She could always adjust the timing to make sure Kali didn't walk in on anything. Then again, that could be fun too. There was a certain thrill in worrying about being walked in on, and Kali struck her as the sort that would just join in. Kali had been so sweet and tender with her after that rough night at Nim, and she loved her for it. Cho pouted. She didn't want to be shipped off on a ship full of strangers. She wanted more time with Kali and Ojeran and Bruno too. They were all a lot of fun. She sensed the door unlock again. She heard a rustling just on the other side of the door. Just bring that in once you've gotten it out of the packaging. He said something. I left my jewelry by the sink, Cho said loudly. I can't translate without it. Your speech knack thing isn't working. There was a pause before he spoke. You sure? He was speaking broken Terran Common. It must be one of those toggled abilities. He must have turned it off for some reason. The stress he was under must be interfering with his concentrating. Are you having trouble getting it up? Cho giggled. She could hear him talking just outside. She had gotten so used to him using that ability that she'd forgotten what his natural voice sounded like. It had a nice deep rumble, the sort that would be great for pillow talk if she could understand it. Then again, it might be better this way. He was a great guy, but he was no Casanova. As long as he sounded like that, it wouldn't matter if he was reading a dictionary. The effect would be the same. I promise there's nothing in here you haven't seen before. Just bring me my stuff, Cho laughed, then added, please. He was entering something into his tablet. He kept adding and removing words. Hey, oi Aaron. I can feel every stroke. Stop worrying about your wording. Cho blushed. She didn't mean for it to sound dirty. Ferricine didn't have hair. He seemed to be searching for the words to ask. Hasn't Kali let you watch her shave? Cho asked. It wasn't a big deal, but she had to shave more than just her pits and legs. He hit the keys for hair, no, and fur, then deleted it to start over. It's fine, you can watch until I get to the weird bits, Cho said loudly. Kali's skin was always so smooth. Cho had never stopped to wonder why. Shaving was a real hassle at times. It must be nice to not grow hair where you were just going to have to hack it off. Ojeran opened the door, came in, and handed over her shaving supplies. She considered trying to shave in a sultry manner, but wasn't even sure what that would look like. If he was just interested in the process, it would kind of defeat the point. He watched her intently while she shaved her legs and looked even more fascinated while she was clearing the contour of her armpits. He might not have even realized natural Terran women grow hair under there. Cho banished him before getting to work shaving her lady bits. The timing was good. She heard his tablet beep while he was walking away. Tell Azuri I say hi, Cho yelled to him. She heard the sound of the balcony door sliding open. Cho finished up, rinsed off, dried off, tied up her hair up in one towel, and wrapped a second around her body. Ojeran was still on the balcony talking to Azuri in a language she'd never heard before. After putting back on her earrings and necklace, Cho did a quick search, just to sate her curiosity to see what language it was. No matches were found. There was one word that kept popping up that didn't look like the others. It wasn't actually a different font, but looked like it was from a different language. The bag on the vanity counter had clothes in it, but not her clothing. She looked through it while running a search on the oddball term. It was a term from the Lementic language which referenced a species that sounded vaguely familiar. Kalmia. Oh my, Cho blushed as she pulled a pair of scale-patterned stocking and garters out of the bag. She walked to the end of the vanity area and held up the bag so he could see it and asked, "Is this for me?" He nodded without interrupting his conversation. That certainly put to rest any questions she had. Hopefully the call he was on wouldn't kill his mood. He must have checked the tags on her clothes when he went to her apartment. Everything looked like it should be the right size, but the variance between makers varied enough to make tags almost meaningless. Judging from the selection, he was planning on taking her on a date, not just fucking. Cho smiled. Azuri was lucky to have him, and she was grateful his wife was willing to share. Why can't I find a Terran guy like him? Cho pouted then snickered. I'm willing to settle for one with just one cock if I have to. Ojaran was looking at her. Just talking to myself, Cho blushed. Do you want me to put on the garters now? He nodded enthusiastically. Gaurun. Thump, thump, thump. Someone was knocking at his door. His employees at Geestasio's knew better than to visit his lair. He lived in Blade's Edge so he'd be left alone, but lately several of the factions had seen fit to interrupt the tranquility that could be found here. They seemed intent on culling the population, but it was their own numbers that were being diminished. He'd even gone to the streets from time to time in order to demonstrate how feeble these supposed hunters were. Most weren't even worthy of bloodying his claws. They were fine for target practice from his rooftop, but not much more. The unwelcome visitor had interrupted him while working out in his basement dojo. It was a bold attempt to get his attention. If they interrupted him again, he'd do them the honor of bludgeoning them with the arm that knocked. They didn't deserve the charity of cauterizing the hole that resulted from weaponizing one of their limbs. Thump, thump, thump. As you wish, Gaurun snarled as he walked to a shadow in the adjacent hallway. He thought about the shadow across from his door and the shadow he was approaching, and felt them overlap and merge as he stepped through the linked shadows, emerging just behind the doorknocker outside. Wait please, the gray-furred pygmy Karzan pled as Gaurun pinned him against the doorway by one arm, pulling it taut, preparing to cleave it from his body. Didn't I already kill you? Gaurun hissed. Just a few hours ago, they whimpered. And you returned, Gaurun chortled. I'm a guide. I try to keep them away from here. They didn't listen. Please. I need help and you're the strongest person I've ever seen. Gaurun moved forward, twisting the pygmy's arm to a hair's breadth from tearing from its socket. What help is worth you risking your life to ask for? I saw one of the two women who saved me. She started walking toward the east gate right after talking to some guy with white fur. I think she was under mind control. I owe her my life. Please save her. I have 3 conditions, Gaurun hissed into their ear. Anything, he begged. Call Geestasio's to let my people know whenever you hear about a scheduled tour of Blade's Edge. Carry her out of the area yourself and never knock on my door again. But the animals. Gaurun released him. I'll be on the roof with my rifle. If you want to save her, you should run. Thank you, he said as he straightened up. I said run, Gaurun roared. He rushed off. At least this one didn't dampen my doorstep, Gaurun chuckled softly as he headed inside to get his sniper rifle. It was a real hassle. After brunch, they had deactivated her old chip, issued her a new ID chip linked to her new stipend payee account, and released the hold on the held payment. They didn't mind letting her keep the title of Lady Darkseed, conditional on her continuing the hunt to avenge the victims of the Nadrok massacre. Her guess at how much had been in her account before Jack started draining it dry had been way off the mark. They were reluctant to give her an exact figure, but he'd embezzled over 3,000 gal cred. After a long conversation about Strawberry's proposed idea for the hotel next to the containment facility, they agreed to a compromise to compensate for her loss. She was now the proud co-owner of an abandoned 16-story, 150-room hotel, not including the penthouse. She wasn't a citizen, so she couldn't be the primary owner. It didn't take long to convince Bruno to be the primary owner and manager for the property. Collie's only real condition was that the penthouse would always be available for her use. It was probably going to need some work. Hopefully the 500 Gaucred from her stipend payment would be enough to take care of everything.